What kind of person would rip a cane from an elderly woman's trembling hands and hurl it into a muddy ditch, all for a fleeting moment of spite? That's the question that haunted me as I stood on the cracked sidewalk of Maple Street, staring at the ditch where my grandmother's cane now lay, half submerged in murky water, its polished wood glinting faintly under the afternoon sun. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth, and Grandma Ruth's frail shoulders shook as she leaned against me, her voice barely a whisper. Why would she do this, Ellie? Why? Grandma Ruth wasn't just any elderly woman. At 82, she was the heart of our family, a woman who'd raised 3 generations with her sharp wit and unyielding kindness. Her cane, carved from cherry wood by my late grandfather, wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of her resilience, a reminder of the love that had carried her through decades of hardship. So when Karen, the neighborhood's self-appointed queen of petty grudges, snatched it from her hands during a heated argument over a parking spot, it wasn't just an act of cruelty. It was a declaration of war. Karen was the kind of woman who thrived on chaos. With her perfectly manicured nails and a smile that never reached her eyes, she'd spent years terrorizing Maple Street with her complaints about barking dogs, untidy lawns, or kids riding bikes too close to her pristine SUV. But this time, she'd crossed a line. Grandma Ruth had been hobbling back from the corner store, her cane tapping rhythmically against the pavement, when Karen confronted her. The argument was trivial, something about Grandma parking her old Buick too close to Karen's driveway. Witnesses said Karen's voice rose to a shriek, her face red with fury, before she grabbed the cane and flung it into the ditch with a triumphant sneer. Grandma, unsteady without her support, had nearly fallen. A neighbor caught her just in time. I felt my blood boil as I helped Grandma home, her small frame trembling with a mix of shock and humiliation. But as I tucked her into her armchair with a cup of chamomile tea, a plan began to form. Karen didn't know who she was dealing with, not just me. Ellie, the quiet florist who arranged Karen's peonies every spring, but my sister, Mia, a criminal defense lawyer with a reputation for dismantling bullies in the courtroom. Mia wasn't just good at her job. She was a force of nature, a woman who could turn a single piece of evidence into a legal guillotine. And I was certain she'd have something to say about Karen's stunt. By evening, Mia was at Grandma's house, her sharp eyes scanning the scene as I recounted the story. This wasn't just a tantrum, Mia said, her voice low and deliberate. It's assault and destruction of property. Karen's going to regret this. Her confidence was infectious, and for the first time since the incident, I saw a spark of hope in Grandma's eyes. Mia didn't waste time. She called the police, filed a report, and began gathering statements from neighbors who'd witnessed Karen's outburst. The plan was simple. Press charges, make Karen face the consequences, and get Grandma's cane back, or at least make Karen pay for a new one. But as the days passed, the situation grew murkier. Karen, it turned out, wasn't just a petty tyrant, she was cunning. She denied everything, claiming Grandma had dropped the cane and she'd merely moved it out of the way. She even produced a witness, a nervous young man named Tim who lived across the street. Tim, barely out of his teens, stammered through a story that backed Karen's version, his eyes darting nervously as he spoke. Something about him felt off, but Mia brushed it aside. He's just a kid, she said, probably scared of her. We'll crack him in court. The neighborhood buzzed with tension. Sides were drawn. Some stood with Grandma, others with Karen, swayed by her charm or intimidated by her influence. I spent my days at the flower shop, arranging bouquets while fielding whispers from customers. Did you hear Karen's planning a countersuit? One woman said, leaning over a display of lilies. Says your grandma provoked her. The idea was laughable, but it gnawed at me. Karen's lies were spreading like wildfire, and I began to wonder if we'd underestimated her. Then came the twist I never saw coming. One rainy afternoon, as I was closing up the shop, Tim appeared at the door, his hoodie soaked and his face pale. I need to talk to you, he said, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting Karen to materialize behind him. Inside, he spilled everything. Tim wasn't just a neighbor, was Karen's nephew, and she'd been paying him to lie. But that wasn't the worst of it. Tim revealed that Karen had a history of targeting vulnerable people in the neighborhood, manipulating them into disputes to fuel her sense of power. Last year, she'd driven an elderly widower to sell his home after months of harassment over his overgrown garden. "She's not right in the head," Tim whispered, "but she's my aunt." I didn't know how to say no. His confession changed everything. Mia pounced on the information, using it to build a case not just for assault but for a pattern of predatory behavior. Tim agreed to testify, his guilt outweighing his fear of Karen. For the first time, I felt we had the upper hand. The trial date was set, and Maple Street braced for a showdown. The courtroom was small but packed, the air heavy with anticipation. Grandma sat in the front row, her hands folded tightly in her lap, while Karen sat across the aisle, her face a mask of calm defiance. Mia was a whirlwind, presenting evidence with surgical precision. Neighbor testimonies, photos of the cane in the ditch, and Tim's reluctant but damning account. Karen's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, tried to paint Grandma as confused and Karen as a misunderstood Good Samaritan. But Mia dismantled his arguments with ease. By the time Tim took the stand, the room was electric. His voice shook as he admitted Karen's coercion, and I saw her facade crack, her lips tightening into a thin line. The judge's ruling was swift. Karen was found guilty of assault and ordered to pay restitution for the cane, along with a fine for emotional distress. Grandma's relief was palpable, and Mia squeezed my hand, a rare smile breaking through her professional demeanor. We'd won her, so I thought, but victory came at a cost. That night, as we celebrated at Grandma's house with her famous apple pie, a call came from the hospital. Karen, humiliated and enraged by the verdict, had confronted Grandma outside her home earlier that evening. No one saw what happened. Karen claimed it was an accident, but Grandma had fallen, her hip shattered. The cane, retrieved from the ditch and returned to her that morning, lay broken beside her. She was alive, but the doctors warned she might never walk again. I sat by her hospital bed, tears streaming down my face as she gripped my hand. "It's not your fault, Ellie," she whispered, her voice weak but steady. "Some people are just broken inside." Mia stood in the corner, her face a storm of guilt and fury. She blamed herself for not anticipating Karen's retaliation, but I knew the truth. Karen's cruelty was a force no one could have fully predicted. The neighborhood moved on as neighborhoods do. Karen sold her house and left Maple Street, her reputation in tatters. Tim, free from her influence, started volunteering at the community center, trying to make amends. But for our family, the scars remained. Grandma's spirit stayed strong, but her body was confined to a wheelchair, her days of tending her garden or walking to the corner store gone forever. As I sat in her room one evening, arranging a vase of Karen flowers ironic, given their name, I thought about the cost of justice. We'd fought for Grandma, exposed Karen's malice, and won in the eyes of the law. But at what price? The cane, once a symbol of love and strength, was now a reminder of a battle that had taken more than it gave. And as I kissed Grandma's forehead, her breathing soft in the dim light, I realized some wounds cut too deep to heal. Nd.